Hello there. Every day I get comments like this on some of my content from about 6 to 8 months ago, where I looked at the rate of vaccine injuries in this country to see exactly how many injuries that there were out there. Because we hear a lot from conspiracy theorists about how prolific the injuries actually are. Now, as part of my latest Substack piece, which is available now for free, you can check it out in the link in my bio. I actually went through and debunked a whole bunch of conspiracy theory claims, and one of them was that the vaccine was not safe and effective. And in that, I looked at what those injury rates were. So for New Zealand, for example, it works out to be just over 0.5% of all the 12 million doses that were given out have resulted in some kind of injury. And that can be from the really extreme end of the spectrum with death all the way through to the other end with a sore arm at vaccination point. We allowed people to report on themselves, as well as having doctors and medical professionals report any kind of adverse reaction. At the same time, though, everywhere else in the world that's kind of comparable to us has done the same thing. They've allowed people to be able to report their own adverse reactions. That included the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. In Australia, they found 0.2% of all of their 66 million vaccinations given out resulted in some kind of adverse reaction. In the US, it's a little different because they go state by state, and it worked out on average about 0.5%. And in the UK, they use a slightly different system where it's done in blocks of 1,000. And in a block of 1,000 vaccinations, zero point 0.5 of those vaccinations resulted in some kind of adverse effect. So worldwide, the data shows that, yeah, the adverse reactions to the vaccine are really slim. Now, one of the other things that sort of ties into this is this weird belief of sudden adult death syndrome, which basically says if you had the vaccine, you're going to die in some mysterious way, and more people are doing that. But that's also not the case. If you have a look at this data from the UK, where it looks at all mortality rates, everybody who died versus vaccination rate, you'll see that the number of people who died is not significantly higher in vaccinated people. It doesn't matter what the cause of death was, that should be inverted if it was something that was being caused by the vaccine. In fact, if you look at the worldwide data right here, it's exactly the same thing. The more vaccinated the population, the less excess all cause mortality that was out there, which means that the vaccines are not in any way linked to an increase in sudden adult death syndrome. In fact, if you have a look at the graph here for all New Zealand deaths from 2014 to 2023, you'll see that there's a fairly regular pattern. And while there has indeed been a spike recently, which can be attributed to COVID, which is the blue part on the bottom of this graph, it doesn't mean that that's causing excess sudden death. What is really fascinating for me about this particular graph, though, is that you can see the increase with population size, and you can see an increase through winter, which is something that happens in most Western cultures and is put down to things like really poor ventilation in people's houses. Also, a really interesting thing to note is how our responses have affected the outcomes. In the US, for example, since the beginning of the pandemic, about 11% of all people who got COVID died. In New Zealand, that's less than 1% at the moment, meaning that our vaccination rollout, our MIQ facilities, and our stop break lockdowns did a really good job in making sure that people were kept alive. So, no, it is not true when they turn around and they say things like there are a lot more injuries or vaccines are causing death. There's a couple of other really fascinating conspiracy theories in this piece as well. So go and check out that article on Substack. Feel free to share it and comment on it, or subscribe to it to get it in your inbox.